And then suddenly death appeared to me and held out his hand to me, like a gentleman.
As a figure?
Yes, you perceive the energy, and then the figure forms in the brain.
Since when have you been speaking so openly about the subject of near-death experiences?
Since my miracle.
It needed a kickstart. Miss Edlmair, you're a music teacher, but by your own definition, you also do consciousness work and spiritual healing. And you are involved in a support group for people who have had a near-death experience. You can look back on remarkable spiritual experiences, and your contact with the beyond began in October 2002 with an electrical accident. To begin with, I'd like to ask you to tell us what happened. How did it all unfold?
It's not that easy to tell the story. I'll try to keep it brief. It actually didn't happen in the course of the electrical accident itself, but only later during my recovery. I had an electrical accident. We had 3 little rabbits, and they had chewed on some cables, and the cables had fused together, and I went over them with a damp rag. Then I saw a beautiful firework display, all in one color, and then there was nothing.
So you lost consciousness?
Yes, exactly. When I came to again, I noticed that my whole body had cramped up completely. My hands, everything, my feet. I really couldn't move anymore. Then I heard my children in the next room. I made some signs that I was there, and I called out to them. It never even occurred to me to go to the hospital or to see a doctor. I asked my children to run me a bath, and they helped me get into the bathtub, and then I massaged everything out. What remained was the left arm. I'm left-handed. It was paralyzed, and it was gray, really ash gray, and it was just hanging down. At the time, I was working in a hospital as a teacher, and on Monday, I went to school quite normally. That experience was striking because it was like slow motion. I walk onto the children's ward, and a doctor comes toward me, very slowly, and she takes me by the hand, without a word, and we walk to the ER, and she says, "Right, now you tell me what happened."
So she saw it?
She noticed it, exactly. There was nothing they could do anymore. Then I started getting severe pain. I had 3 small children. Everything was intense. Everyday life was intense. The pain was intense. And somehow it felt hopeless, because nobody could help me. Then I went to a neurologist, and he said I should take something for my psyche. I knew I was strong. I didn't need anything for my psyche. I just wanted something for the pain. That was one part of it.
So the arm could only be moved with great pain?
No, it couldn't be moved at all. I had to relearn everything with my right hand, with 3 small children. That was one part. The other part, which was important for this encounter, was that at the time I was caring for a woman who had terminal cancer. And I used to visit her. One day, I came home again after visiting her, and that evening, I felt very, very bad with the pain.
That was also after the accident, right?
That was after the accident, yes. All of it only happened after the accident. And then suddenly, death appeared to me and held out his hand to me, like a gentleman.
As a figure?
Yes. You perceive an energy, and then the figure forms in the brain. Then there was a short dialogue, but it wasn't spoken. It was all thoughts. And I said, "You haven't really come for me. You've come for the friend I'm accompanying, the cancer patient." And he said, yes, that's true. And because I was in her energy, and I was also feeling so bad, he had ended up with me, and I was supposed to come with him.
What does come with him mean? Was it an energetical pull? The feeling that you were moving somewhere else?
Your attention goes somewhere else.
Your attention goes somewhere else.
Your attention goes somewhere else, and then everything is simultaneous. I think I perceived 5 things at the same time. I was speaking with death. I saw my mother. I saw my grandmother. I saw other people too. I saw my life. You perceive this feeling, this otherness, all at once, and it's all simultaneous. It's not one thing after another the way people imagine it, but all at once, and you also have no sense of time.
Could you tell us a little more about those individual elements? So, you also had a classic life review of your whole life. How did that happen?
There are cases for felt tips where you slip them in, the kind you can roll up. My life was simply spread out like that, as if you had rolled open one of those pen cases. That's how I saw my life before me, and I could look wherever I wanted. Whatever interested me, I looked at. But you also had a broad overview.
Were you always a spectator, or at the same time also a participant?
Basically a spectator. But when you go into a situation, then you perceive it. For me, one situation that had kept coming up in my life, something that had burdened me, was an incident with my sister, my older sister. And I believed I had done something really terrible, and that had always burdened me. And that was the first thing I looked at. And then I saw that it was nothing at all. It was nothing at all. And then suddenly something else stood out to me, where I realized I had made a remark that had caused ripples I had never expected at the time.
So another perspective, one that also shows the effects of your own actions on others in a new light.
Exactly.
Were these mostly events that were especially emotionally charged in some way, or were they also mundane, everyday experiences?
That's hard to answer, because the feelings, the most beautiful thing for me at first was that the feelings fall away, and you perceive everything neutrally, but you see the energies. You see the energies and what it does to people.
Am I understanding that correctly? The evaluation of the whole thing was neutral, but the feelings still had a certain quality, so that you could tell whether something was pleasant or unpleasant.
It was a carpet of love. That's one way to put it. And on this carpet of love, everything is possible. Everything can be, and everything is allowed to be. But on this carpet of love, you then perceive neutrally what the effects of the individual people are.
The underlying sensation, as you say, the carpet on which everything took place, its quality was love.
It's such a vast love. It's unbelievable.
And from being embedded in love like that, there also came a completely different, neutral perspective on everything. Neutral in the sense that there was no judgment of the kind we know here.
Exactly.
No condemning either.
No, not at all.
Did you experience it as unconditional love?
Yes. I've relived that here 3 or 4 times, or been allowed to relive it, and I can't bear it here. I have to lay down on the floor, because I simply can't bear it. The first time I knelt down, and even that wasn't enough. It's such a magnificent, powerful love that we can't bear it here in this density.
You also said there was an encounter with your mother and your grandmother. Could you describe that in a bit more detail as well? They had both died by that point, right?
They had both died, and there was this great archway. And behind it, they were all standing. My mother, my grandmother, and other people too, many others I didn't know. And I perceived them the way I had seen them when they were alive.
Was that also an energy in which you recognized the essence of your mother and the essence of your grandmother? Or did the two of them look exactly, even outwardly, the way you had known them at a very specific age?
Exactly, yes, they did.
Was the experience in any way also connected with messages? That something was said to you or given to you?
Yes, but not from my mother and not from my grandmother, rather from another energy. I then knew that I was not allowed to go through the archway. I was not allowed to go through, even though I would have liked to. And they explained to me that I couldn't, that I had to go back to Earth.
So that was the border, so to speak.
And I didn't do it. And then I was told that I wasn't there for nothing, but that they would teach me some things. And that they would come again more often and fetch me. And then they would show me some things, and I was supposed to pass them on. But I only perceived that at the edges. That was not the main message at the time.
So a kind of introduction to a task.
Yes, but that wasn't clear to me then. Later, it's like a dream. Because you dream at night, and in the morning, I wake up and I remember the dream. But while you're dreaming, it's completely real. What I experienced there was far more real than life here. Life here is not as real to me as life over there.
Even when you compare it now, did it seem to you that that was the actual reality? And earthly life more like a dream by comparison?
Yes, but I brought a little of that reality back with me.
You said death, so to speak, took you with him. Did you experience that as entering something full of light?
I think that happens automatically. It wasn't like, boom, now there's the light.
Not a tunnel with light at the end.
No, I didn't have anything like that. It was just suddenly there. My attention was suddenly elsewhere.
And did this communication with death have any other special aspects?
He told me when he would come back. And then he said, but that still doesn't mean that will be my end. I can still change it 3 times or postpone it 3 times.
That means you still have some say in it.
Yes. Everyone does. That's something I took back with me. Everyone has their freedom. We all have our freedom.
The future is not fixed. How did things continue afterward on the earthly side?
I can't remember exactly how things went on right after that. I don't know anymore. I only know what life was like afterward. And for me, it was as if I had brought the spiritual world back with me. And I had the feeling that I was floating 10 centimeters above the ground, but I was walking quite normally. Then there were all these strange things. If I was sitting opposite someone, their life would rattle through me from the present back into the past, all the way to them being a baby. But I couldn't ask people, is that true? It really tempted me, but I didn't dare. Or I always had the feeling that people were speaking to me, and I would answer them. And then from their reaction, I realized that the people hadn't been speaking to me. Those had been their thoughts.
And did you have experiences where you noticed this isn't just some imagination, this actually corresponds to reality? I really am sensing what they are thinking.
Yes, I did.
Were there experiences like that?
Yes, definitely. You can tell from the reactions and from what people say. They tend to get startled when they realize that what I'm saying matches. And then there was also the fact that I saw beings, and with some of them, I couldn't tell whether they were alive or not, whether they were physically real or not. Alive, they all are anyway, whether they were physically real or not. And that went on for a long time, actually, quite a long time. Then I started looking into brain research.
To be able to place it somehow.
Exactly. I thought I was going crazy, but I didn't talk to anyone about it.
But all of that began with this near-death experience. You hadn't had anything like that before, right?
No, not at all.
Were you a spiritual person before that?
I was a seeker. I grew up very multicultural as far as religions are concerned. From Catholicism to Mormons to Jehovah's Witnesses to the Moon sect. I really experienced everything in my family. And then I myself became Protestant. But later I left too. So in that sense, a seeker.
The aftermath is a major life issue for people who have had a near-death experience. Something people often don't talk about enough. For many, it's a traumatic experience. It's not a matter of integrating the experience to everyday life, but, as you say, integrating everyday life into the experience, because the experience seems much more real and also remains in consciousness. So how did things continue for you? How did you manage that? With brain research? That probably doesn't really get you very far either.
No, it was my children. And the fact that I almost caused an accident. I was driving through an intersection and I slammed on the brakes because I thought someone was standing there. But nobody was standing there. And it was a big intersection. That was the first time I became aware. Stop. You have to do something. It can't go on like this. And the second thing was that I always knew what my children were doing. I only had to look. No matter where I was, I only had to look to see what my children were doing at home. And one evening, they were watching a horror film together when they were little. And I called home and said, "Turn that off immediately." And that was too much for them. Then they stood in front of me and said, "Mom, please, finally stop watching. We have no freedom at all anymore." And that was when I realized that I was overstepping boundaries. I really realized I was overstepping. And then I knew I had to do something, and I wasn't imagining it either. That much was clear to me.
Because of all the reactions.
It was reality, exactly. And the fact that what my children were doing was actually correct. And then you meet the right people. And thank God, I came to a wonderful woman who helped me with that.
A woman who understood the experience and knew what you should do. Is there anything from that path that you could perhaps pass on to others in a similar situation? What was important there?
What was important was that it's in our own hands. We can speak with the spiritual world about which abilities we want to have and which we don't. And I didn't know that back then. For me, it was overwhelming. And then I was told that I can say what I want to have and what I don't want to have. And then it became very clear. I only want that energy for myself. I only want the spiritual world for myself and not for others, because that is intrusive. And if someone wants to know something about themselves and comes to me looking for help, then I also get the energy from the other person. But otherwise not. And it's really important to know that you can regulate all of that.
And how did things continue for you physically? Today there's no sign anymore that anything was wrong with the arm.
The lady helped me with that too. I owe her a lot. She explained to me that you have something like an aura. And she explained to me what had happened, that the nerves had been severed where the burn wound was. And I did what she told me to do. And after a week, suddenly, I could move my arm a little. Then I built the muscles back up. I don't know how it works, but I think a lot works through the mind. And she helped me make that work.
Did this ability for self-healing show up again later in your life?
It stayed with me all my life. Because now I'm convinced that we truly are the creators of our lives. But that took time. The spiritual world really taught me a lot. They really took me on journeys. But I didn't do what was actually my task, namely to pass it on. And so then they sent me breast cancer. And they said, if you don't want to take on this task, and I always longed for the other side, then you may go earlier. Then I went for a 2-hour walk and thought about what I wanted. And then I was shown that if I were to go earlier now than planned, what effects that would have in my surroundings, in terms of energies. You always see it in energies.
That happened in the middle of everyday life, an inner vision during your walk.
Exactly. Which is completely normal for me. And then I saw what effects it would have, not only for my family, but more generally as well. And then I decided, okay, I'm staying here. I'm consciously choosing this place again, now, Earth. But then I negotiated with them. If I can heal this breast cancer with spiritual healing, then I will pass it on. And it's not the way people imagine that if you're guided by the spiritual world, everything is smoothed out. Because we're human. And I'm a human being, completely normal. And sometimes you have basic trust. Sometimes you have less basic trust. Or more or less self-confidence. And depending on that, you believe in yourself and the greater whole. Then things go better, and then worse again. And then came a moment when I buckled. When I lost that basic trust, because everyone around me was speaking negatively. And then I made an appointment at the hospital. And as I was riding there by bus, I said to myself, if I'm on the right path, I need a miracle. And I got it. The cancer was practically half as much within 1 month. And then I said to the doctor, I'll sign anything. I don't care. I'm going straight home again. I knew then, I can do this now.
And this consciousness work and spiritual healing, in your words, that was when you began to see it as a calling as well, right?
Yes. From the moment I experienced this miracle, it really was a moment when I suddenly felt such strength within me. And I knew we truly are the creators of our lives. And that was suddenly very strong, and it hadn't been there before. That was what had still been missing. And now I can talk about it. And I want to pass it on to people, that we have such a creative power, an incredible power.
You also wrote a book titled All Coincidence or Wonderful Providence. It brings together 21 episodes from your life, formative experiences and encounters. How did that come about?
I once had an experience. My mother died in Kaprun, back then in the glacier railway disaster. My relationship with my mother and my sister had become a bit complicated toward the end. After my mother's death, I no longer had any contact with my sister. After some years, we reconciled. After that reconciliation, I went for a walk with my son. And suddenly, I looked at the meadow and found one 4-leaf clover after another. That was such a typical sign from my mother. My mother always found 4-leaf clovers when she was alive. Always. I searched for hours and never found a single one. And suddenly, I found one after the other. And then my son started finding them too. There and there and there and there. And then we carried them home. My mother died at the age of 61. And there were 61 4-leaf clovers. And for me, it was completely clear, because my sister and I realized that my mother had lied to both of us. And that was what had caused the rift between us. And this was her way of apologizing. And that story fascinated me so much that I simply wrote it down for myself.
And were both of you able to accept that apology?
I was able to accept it for myself. And somehow it was even funny. and I wrote it down for myself. And it wasn't so easy because I always was bad at German. So I had to overcome that. And then another thing happened, and I wrote that down too. And at some point, I wanted to thank someone. And I didn't know what I could give that person because they basically already had everything they needed. And then I thought, I'll send them the story. So I sent them 2 stories, and that person was actually the one who gave me the idea and encouraged me to make a book out of it. And that's how the book gradually came into being.
You mentioned earlier that it is important to you to be able, so to speak, to open the door to the spiritual world yourself and close it again. Are you now also active in some form of mediumistic counseling? Do people come to you? Do you want to establish this contact for others as well?
It's important to me, yes. If someone wants contact, especially when children have died, then it's something enriching for the bereaved. Because first of all, they hear that it is beautiful on the other side. And when they hear something personal, then they know, okay, this is really true. Details I tell them from their lives, some connection they have, and something that makes it clear to them that the children are well, or what they are doing now.
So it happens fairly often that you can offer very concrete comfort to bereaved parents, or whoever has just lost a child, by conveying credible things from the child's life or dying process, because that convinces the parents that this is a real contact.
Exactly, because there are some things I simply can't possibly know.
Could you perhaps give an example of how that works for you? How you can establish that contact?
I usually ask for the name, because there are many energies there, and then you see which energy responds, and then I speak with that energy. It can then say very specific things. For example, something about a stuffed animal, or what the father or mother used to read aloud, the book, or some special adventure, a trip, or an outing, or some quote or conversation they had. But that usually isn't even necessary. It does the relatives or the people good when they know that the person is well, where they are, what they are doing, or when I tell them about my own experience, about how beautiful it actually is.
Can one say in general that this is always the central message, I'm doing well? Or are there other cases too?
There are other cases too. Let's put it this way. They are well, but there's also something like a bubble, a preliminary stage before actual release. I don't like any of these words. There are no words for what I actually want to express. Just as we have it here, there are also different levels on the other side where one can stay. But you automatically feel well there. All of the burdening things here on earth, they all fall away.
So what belonged directly to one's social role?
Or pain, physical pain, or whatever it may be, all of that falls away. So in that sense, one is well right away. But until the soul is healed, there are definitely different levels.
You also sometimes hear that people who were very attached to possessions, to power, to earthly structures, and who then, the keyword being bound souls, do not get away so quickly. Have you experienced anything like that too?
No, I haven't experienced that. But they showed me how it works. The spiritual world showed me how long it takes, how one casts off the bodies, the energetic bodies. One thing is a near-death experience. That means I lay down my physical body. But I have not laid down the other energetic bodies. And death is something else. The transition into the other world, I wouldn't say death. The transition back to my essence, which was stretched out, because I direct my attention toward Earth, and in doing so expanded my essence downward toward Earth. And when I really go to the other side and return home, then I also cast off the energetic bodies because I return to a higher vibration, and then I no longer need them.
You have contact with various people who have died. You convey messages to relatives that basically say, "I'm doing well." And my question now would be, from these contacts, can you recognize a picture of what learning processes initially await people who have died?
At first, no learning process at all. At first, only healing. Becoming whole, becoming healthy. The essence is healthy anyway. The soul is healthy in and of itself. The body is sick and shows us certain signs. The human essence is in and of itself healthy. But sometimes, so much was done to us in life that it is like the soul being caressed. Some come into a kind of sanatorium where the soul is simply stroked for as long as it takes until everything is well again. And only then do they look at their life, or in between, again and again, depending on how they feel. It's different for everyone. Everyone tells it differently somehow. For one person, it goes faster. For another, it goes more slowly. From what people tell, then there are some who are still living in a kind of bubble, who do not yet quite know where to go or what comes next.
People who have had near-death experiences often also report becoming one with the light. That this individuality is not lost in a greater whole, but is taken up into it. Is that also part of the path in the beyond, this merging with the light? How do you see that?
That's simply the way it is. This vibrational level, where that vibration is, it consists of countless drops, just as an ocean consists of countless drops. And we are also drops in this ocean. And on Earth, we feel ourselves to be a single drop. We simply expand that drop until we are in this density.
And in the whole, is the feeling of being embedded still there for the drop?
Yes, but differently.
My last question, as far as the support group is concerned, do you have plans there? Or are there other plans in general? What lies ahead for you?
I let myself be guided. I really let myself be guided. I don't worry about the future. I look at what comes toward me, and I listen to what the spiritual world says about how things go on. And I believe it is good that something like a support group exists. If someone finds it hard to talk about it, or perhaps doesn't even know what they experienced, because that happens to many people that they don't know what they have experienced, then it is good that they can go there, speak with someone, and place it in context. And that one can also give them tips, that there are things like Thanatos TV, or books, literature. You think all of this is already widely known among people, but it really still isn't.
Since when have you been speaking so openly about the subject of near-death experiences?
Since my miracle.
It needed a kickstart. In any case, thank you very much for your openness, for sharing your life story with us. Thank you very much for this conversation, and all the best to you going forward.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.